Anarchy ain't free. Communism does not work. It never has worked. This is Gene, and you're listening to Dumbasses Talking Politics. Hey, it's Gene, and now we've got a brand new episode. I'm still trying to figure out why my YouTube videos are not showing up. I have a feeling I'm violating some copyright rules and things like that. I'm trying to figure that whole thing out. I don't know how. I know I had some music because I like to play some good music, so I play some music from YouTube, and apparently I'm violating copyright. But it's finally about time to discuss what's going on in Seattle. So let's get right into it. Antifa and Black Lives Matter have gone insane in Seattle. They have taken a 7-block area of Seattle and declared it a separate state called the City Hall Autonomous Zone. And of course, you've got to have a name when you create a brand new country, which is what they're trying to do. And they've called it basically CHAZ, for City Hall Autonomous Zone. I mean, it's really dumb. But, you know, this is the first U.S., and that's not true, it's not the first U.S. social experiment, political experiment on communism and the collectivism. So, after the shutdown between the left-wing rioters and police on Sunday, Democratic Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan announced late Monday an effort to de-escalate the situation by ordering the police to pull out of the East Precinct of this little area. She says this, quote, "In an effort to proactively de-escalate interactions between protesters and law enforcement outside the East Precinct, Chief Best and Seattle Police Department officers have removed barricades surrounding the East Precinct while safely securing the facility. Keeping demonstrations peaceful must be a joint effort between our community members and law enforcement. I am hopeful that tonight, with these operational changes, our city can peacefully move forward together." So essentially what the mayor did is she pulled out any type of law and order or anything in this area. And the police chief, Carmen Best, who is a black woman, was ordered to do so and wasn't really all that thrilled with it. Well, then these people got together and they decided to take over. And by the way, the East Precinct is right by City Hall. That's why it's called the City Hall Autonomous Zone. So they've actually surrounded about 6 to 7 blocks of area. And they made it into their own little country called CHAZ. That's awesome. And I'm not sure that Mayor Durkan actually thought this was happening. I know that Governor Jay Inslee, who, by the way, did run for president at one point, I just want to point that out, he didn't know anything about it. He was actually quoted saying, I don't know anything about it. I can't give you any information. He may have been the only person, I think this was on Tuesday too. He may have been the only person that had no idea this was happening. Everybody else, especially on the right, were laughing their butts off because this was just like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. So this is another social experiment testing out communism. And that's essentially what it is. But the big question has to be, okay, what do these guys actually want? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what these guys want.
Their list of desires it's huge. It is absolutely huge. And I think I'm going to give you a lot of it, but not all of it, because it is just stupid. So here's the list. The abolition of police and court systems. Nice. So in other words, no punishment for anyone who breaks laws. That's going to work out well. Abolition of youth jails and free all prisoners. So it doesn't matter what you did. You're under 18, you should go. You're free. Investigate past and current cases for police misconduct. Well, okay, I think we've already done that. So what's the point? Reparations for victims of police brutality. Doxing police officers who are accused of police brutality. If you don't know what doxing is, it means actually give their names and addresses of police officers who were simply accused of police brutality. That's always a good idea because nothing is going to happen to those police. Retrials for all people of color, not white people, because white people are evil. All people of color who are already convicted of a crime. They already had a trial. They don't need another one. But let's retry them. And let's make sure that the jury is all of the same color as that person. Wow. Here's something I like. We demand that the city of Seattle and the state government release any prisoner currently serving time for marijuana-related offenses and expunge the related conviction. I love this because here's the thing. Some of these guys who are convicted of marijuana-related crimes actually were trafficking. And when they were trafficking, they were using weapons. And most of the time, when they were trafficking marijuana, they were trafficking other drugs like heroin, cocaine, crack. It's very rarely that you have a guy, especially in a state where marijuana is legal, is only trafficking marijuana. So this is just absolutely dumb. We demand that prisoners currently serving time be given the full and unrestricted right to vote. Okay. So they want, and they want legislation specifically breaking from federal law that prevents felons from being able to vote. So in other words, they want these individuals to be able to vote for president. Yeah, no, there's a reason. Well, that one's never going to work because it's in the Constitution. So you're not going to have that issue. So that's not going to happen. But I mean, just the thought that, the felons are all on their side. Isn't that kind of bizarre? I'm going to say later that these are all criminals and thugs that are in this city. And they are. They're proving to be right now. We haven't talked about it yet, but it's going to happen. But there's this belief that thugs and criminals are always going to vote leftist, democratic, and bizarre. And yes, they probably will. But because a system is not something they can live under. So get rid of the system and then they can live. And they can prosper. And they can prosper because they'll do it through force. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. We demand the replacement of the current criminal justice system and the creation of a restorative, transformative accountability program as a replacement for imprisonment. See, this is the whole thing. And I've had discussions with this, especially with my girlfriend. Is that prison is not meant to be restorative or transformative. It's meant to be punishment. If people are going to sit back and say that crime, that prison or jail or whatever is there to rehabilitate the person, that's really not what it's about. You're in prison not to be rehabilitated. You're in prison to be punished for the crime you committed. So if you're going to change prison, so for example, if I go out and murder someone and now you want to stick me in a place that's going to transform me, that's going to restore me, what does that even mean, restorative? Restore what? If I committed murder, what are you restoring? It's just a very weird statement. And basically what it's saying is there shouldn't be prisons because prisons do not rehabilitate. Prisons are not meant to rehabilitate. They're meant to punish. The death penalty, which is why the left is busting their chops to get rid of the death penalty. The death penalty is not meant to rehabilitate. It's meant to punish and get rid of a human being that has no chance at being part of society. So you gotta love that. Seattle Police Department, between now and the time of its abolition in the near future, empty its lost and found and return it to the property owned by the denizens of the city. This is weird to me. So basically what they're saying is anything that is, it's not, first off, it's not their lost and found. This is not the police lost and found. If I'm carrying a gun illegally, the police will arrest me, they will take my gun, and they will put it in a property room or confiscated items. This is not property at this point. I broke the law. They are not, it is not a lost and found to take my gun and return it to me, who is already a felon, because I was carrying the gun. And it wasn't lost. I gave it up by carrying the property. And I also find this interesting because doesn't the collective communism, they don't believe in property? So why are you doing this? How about you just want to give guns and drugs back to people? That's what you want to do. Because if the criminal has guns and the criminal supports the collective communism, BLM, Antifa, let's call them what they are. Those are communist wings of the United States. Antifa is a communist/anarchist group. BLM is a straight anarchist group. If you have any questions about that, go to their website and look at what they do. It gives it all. So this is kind of weird. Socialized health and medicine for the city of Seattle. I like this one. Because now they're calling it what it is. Not Obamacare, not the Affordable Care Act. We want socialized medicine. You can have socialized medicine. Move to Canada. They're in Seattle. They literally have to go 20 miles north and they've got socialized medicine. Canada will take them. Free public housing, because housing is a right, not a privilege. We've talked about this. This is the problem that the left has. They don't know the difference between a right and a privilege. Having a house is not a privilege. Having a home, a right. Having a housing is not a right. Having water is not a right. Having food is not a right. Having health care is not a right. Those are services. Services are not rights. You got to understand that. Everyone's got to understand that. Abortion is not a right. It's not a right, it's a service. It's a terrible service. It should not be legal because you're murdering someone, but it is a service. They have a hard time. Freedom of speech is a service. Is not a service, is a right. Why? If my right infringes on somebody else's livelihood, that is not a right. That's a service. So, for example, let's just say housing is a right. They want to say a right. Well, if I get a free apartment, that means that the landlord has to give up his place for lower. He owns the property. He has to give it for a lower cost, so that this, or no cost, so this moron can live. Okay. That's, in that case, that right is infringing on that individual. That's not a right. Owning a gun is a right, or being able to carry a firearm is a right, or being able to own a firearm is a right. It is not a right for the government to give you a firearm. That's infringing. They really do mix up rights. By the way, healthcare has never been a right. Food has never been a right. Housing has never been a right in the entire United States, because there were people in the past that died of bad health care, or they couldn't get a doctor and they just died because they couldn't afford a doctor. That's a thing. That's always happened. That always annoys the crap out of me. Okay, next one. Public education. To decrease the average class size in city schools and increase teacher salary? Okay, now you're being stupid. How do you do that? Where's the money going to come from? Oh, well, we'll take it from the rich. That's where everything comes from with the left. We'll just take it from the rich. The rich are moving out of Seattle. I'm telling you that right now. Hey, heck, the rich are moving out of California. They're moving out of these states. Microsoft will not be in Washington in 10 years. Google is thinking of moving out of California. My Google thing might go off now. Tesla is moving out of California. You can't keep taxing people and then creating these stupid programs. Okay. Naturalization services for immigrants of the United States living here undocumented. We demand they be called undocumented because no person is illegal. Yes, people are illegal. If you're in this country illegally, you are an illegal alien. So basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the Immigration and Naturalization Services to call illegal aliens. They're not even illegal immigrants. That's another term used by somebody else. The legal terminology is illegal aliens. Get over it. Deal with it. They are illegal. That individual, that human being in this country is illegal, and he is an alien, which alien means foreign body. That's all it means. These guys don't want to do that. They want to change language, I guess. They want rent control, which has never worked anywhere. Ask Santa Monica. Ask Hollywood. My grandfather used to own apartment buildings. We know rent control doesn't work. It never works. Free college, because, well, I mean, they got to throw the propaganda from somewhere, and usually comes from colleges. Most of these people are probably from the University of Washington. So, yeah, I guess free college makes sense. Abolition of homeless sweeps. We're going to hear a little bit later that homeless sweeps are probably something they wanted. Those protesters or the Chaz residents would have wanted, because they probably wouldn't be so hungry. Employ black doctors to treat black people. Is it me or is that racist? So you're going to hire a black doctor just to treat a black person? What happens if that black doctor, who is incompetent of being a doctor, kills that black person? Is that going to be the white man's fault for not training that incompetent black doctor? Yeah, incompetence seems to be forgotten. Incompetence doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means you're incompetent in a certain position. Employ implicit bias training, I love this. If you do not have a police force and you do not have jails, what do you need implicit bias training for? And by the way, implicit bias training is crap anyway, because implicit basically says you're racist, you just don't know about it. We need to find how you're racist. And finally, last but not least, we got to remove any statues that offend them. And by the way, I heard a great thing on Twitter today where they were asking, do you agree? The reporter was asking the individual, do you agree with them tearing down that statue? They said, oh, yeah. Okay, so why? Well, I don't really know who that guy is. These are uneducated fools. They have heard of philosophy, and they may have gone to college. That doesn't make you educated. I've gone to college. I don't think I'm completely educated. I learn constantly. I learned just this week when my girlfriend was going through her biology class, and I learned something new. You're constantly learning. These people don't learn. They learned a philosophy. They're happy with it. They're done. There is no implicit bias. There's no way you could train for something that's subconscious. If I don't know that I'm not a racist, how are you going to figure it out? It's just absolutely idiotic. Actually, this podcast was supposed to be of multiple topics. We're going to hold this topic. It's Saturday today, Saturday morning. I'm doing a podcast this morning. I'm probably going to do another one on Sunday because I want to talk about those other topics, and I want to merge this garbage that's happening in Seattle with the topics that I'm getting from 4 or 5 different sources, 4 or 5 different stories about our education system, because our education system is crap. The reaction from the politicians and the media are pretty typical. I don't think there's anything really bizarre here. President Trump said that if the Seattle governor didn't do anything, he'd do it, and he'd take care of it. And it would happen fast, and it would. I mean, I have a feeling if anybody, I know, well, we're going to talk about what these people are like, but I know if anybody walked through the streets with a rifle, these people will run like cockroaches when a light is turned on. So, but again, should he? That's a different story. The mayor of Seattle thinks he doesn't. The mayor of Seattle doesn't think anything of it. She thinks that it's just another street party, kind of like that one New York had where they had the 99 percenters. That worked well for New York. She doesn't see it as any more than a street festival. It's crazy. It's tone deaf. She just doesn't see that. I mean, get out of your ivory tower and take a look at what's going on. But she doesn't. Jay Inslee, who's the governor of Seattle, wouldn't admit he knew anything about it. Well, he either lied or he really is blind to what's happening in his state, which makes him a crappy governor either way. Thank God he never actually got any further to being president of the United States than he did. The media at first was all on this. CNN and MSNBC made this seem like the greatest party on earth, made it seem like that this was the greatest idea on earth, made it seem like that this could transform our society. But then when they actually had their guy on the ground interviewed and he had to worry about being shot, shot. We'll get to that. Worried about people yelling at him from the background, people running around. They decided running around and causing trouble, showing all the damage that is in the area, all of the graffiti on the walls. Every time they wanted to interview someone, they'd be crying. Fox News didn't have any problem. They just walked over to someone who was sitting back and looking at there, and she'd be crying or he'd be crying because their businesses are torn apart. It worked out so well for CNN and MSNBC, they started blaming Trump for the Wuhan flu again, and how Trump is killing millions of people from the flu and his lack of efforts in the flu. That's right. This is the one thing the media does. They switch narrative. These guys move goalposts more than field operators at a football game. It's really bad. Here's the thing. The optics are not good. And they're not as good as they thought they were going to be. The media thought it was going to be. And it's because even if they talk about it, that's fine. They can sit back and have a conversation about the concepts that Chaz is trying to accomplish and things like that. But they can only do that for so long until they actually show what's going on there. They have to have a reporter on the ground. They have to show what's going on over there. And that's when things fall apart. And so they've decided, okay, we got to swap this narrative. We'll keep calling Trump a racist, and we'll bring up the Wuhan flu thing again, because I don't think that's died. Do you notice the media is losing their narrative? They really don't have a narrative anymore. And the racist thing is just stupid. They've been calling Republicans racist for decades. So this is not something new. It's an old narrative. But what is the media trying to hide with this little city-state called Chaz? Let's talk about what actually is happening in Chaz. The People's Republic of Chaz is supposed to be what Karl Marx dreamed of as a communist utopia. It's supposed to be a commune where people experience pure freedom. They work together in harmony. They grow their own food. They care for each other. They develop the technology they need. They eliminate the nuclear family because it is patriarchal. Eliminate religion because it builds walls around the freedom of the collective. All people are equal and all receive the same benefits. There's no need for police because people there are for each other and they love each other and they love the community. Crime would be unheard of because nothing is there but communal love and work for the community. There's no need for economy because everyone works for everyone else and everyone gets what they need. There's no reason for money because one will be given the food they need, the housing they need, the health care they need. There's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no bigotry because they're all the same. That's because there is no individual, which is something that capitalism goes completely against. Everyone is equal, and they accept everyone for who they are. So that's a great concept. I read the Communist Manifesto, and reading the Communist Manifesto, it makes sense. But things aren't exactly as grand in Seattle, in Chaz, as the mayor keeps saying it is. In fact, instead of looking like a Marxist utopia drawn out in the Communist Manifesto, it looks like more of the disaster of Orwell's Animal Farm. Here's what's actually happening. As far as their economy goes, they've already run out of food. And they ran out of food because the homeless people didn't exactly read a lot of Marx, and they started stealing the food. They sent out a message the day after they took over these 6 blocks saying that the commune needed vegan meat substitutes and Gatorade because they didn't have any food. They asked the city for pants and tents so that they'd have shelter because they didn't have what they needed. They were provided porta potties because they had nowhere to relieve themselves for that number of people. So the city sat back and gave them porta potties. Why the city's giving them anything, I don't know. They started an agricultural spot in the middle of a park. It gets good. They basically threw dirt on grass and put plants in the dirt. They didn't even look like they dug holes for the plants, and then put the plants in the dirt. That's it. I don't know what they expect was going to grow, and how long it was going to take that dirt to grow. How long it was going to take for those plants to grow, even if they did do it right. And they were sprinkling they were sprinkling the plants with water buckets. In other words, they didn't even have they didn't have the concept of an irrigation system so the plants could continually get water. But that doesn't matter because some homeless guy today on Saturday started running around with 2 sticks saying that if you want this property, you're going to have to fight me for the property. So he basically just trampled all of their plants. Yeah, the co-op thing isn't going to work well. The commune thing isn't going to work well. But worse, they're becoming exactly what they thought they were fighting against. The leader of this community, and we're going to put air quotes on this because he's not really that great a leader, is a rapper named Raz Simone. He has been accused of being more of a warlord than a leader. Here are some of the things he's been accused of. Creating his own police force where members carrying semi-automatic weapons, don't forget, open carry is legal in Washington. And his bands of troops, or whatever they are, have been walking around threatening protesters, kicking people out. There was even a video clip where it was heard that one of the guys was threatening to blow the head off a protester if he didn't cooperate. Oh, wow. Setting up walls and fences to secure the compound, to secure the country, and added an armed security force. Fences? I thought walls and fences were things that the left never wanted, especially around our country. Interesting, huh? It requires an ID to get into Chaz. You can't just walk into Chaz. You need to show ID. Oh, wait a minute. Does that mean if I don't show ID and I run into Chaz, I'm undocumented? Or does it mean I'm illegal? Which is it? And by the way, you guys want IDs? I thought you guys were so against IDs when it came to things like, I don't know, voting. They're extorting businesses for protection money. They are actually going to businesses. And they say, we will not destroy this business if you give us money. That's kind of illegal. Simone has also been accused of bigotry against gays and transgenders, which I thought that's what the BLM movement was about. Not to mention, he won't negotiate with Black Lives Matter's leadership because Black Lives Matter sees this as an opportunity, and he will not deal with them. I guess the community or the concept of communism is less important than just being in control, being in power. And by the way, we've seen that in countries like, I don't know, the Soviet Union, North Korea, Venezuela. It's about power. And Raz Simone has power. And what a shock. He doesn't want to give it up. Just wow. Because of his lack of direction, Simone's power has kind of waned. These guys are a mess. They really have no idea what to do right now. So here's what's actually things that are happening. Businesses are suffering. They're being exhorted. They're closing. They're not even opening up. There is no food. There is no shelter. They have no expertise. They can't grow anything. Crime is high, including robbery, assault, and rape. And when these things happen, they contact the police and medical services from Seattle, which they shouldn't do. But meanwhile, the Seattle PD and the medical services are saying it's taking them three times the length to get to the victims. The homeless are stealing from them, including food and property. The city is becoming a mess with trash, graffiti, feces. It's disgusting. What's ironic is this whole thing was planned. They even had a sign made for Chaz. They had a sign calling it the City Hall Autonomous Zone. They set this up, but their execution fell far short. Or did it fall short? Should we actually be surprised for this? Well, the answer is no, we shouldn't be surprised at all. There has never been a cooperative, a commune, or a collective that has ever been effective or long-lasting. They've never worked. Because in order to have a utopia, you need to have perfect human beings. There are no perfect human beings. We are petty, jealous, competitive, selfish, and greedy. That works in capitalism because it takes the best of that part. For example, being greedy does not mean that you want to rule the world. Does not mean, or being selfish, doesn't mean there's a good portion of being greedy or selfish. I would say that Bill Gates of Microsoft is probably very greedy, very self-centered. But, he realizes, okay, time to give back. And he does. You don't have that in a communist commune. You just don't have it. In a commune, it is imperative to reject all weakness of human beings. That those weaknesses, the greed, the selfishness, they just don't exist. And that the best of man is going to, and I mean man as in human beings, is going to shine. And that just doesn't happen, especially when you have nothing. Imagine if we tried to do this in a real country. Oh, shoot. That's right, we did. We tried it in the USSR, Russia. We tried it in North Korea, China, Germany, Italy, Venezuela, just to name a few. It's been tried that countries that already had an established technology, Venezuela is really the one I really like to point at. they had established technology, and these people that called for the collective communism failed. Venezuela is the prime example because it is the latest to have failed. So what's going to happen when you got a bunch of freaking 18-year-old hippies running around telling you, oh, collectivism? That's the whole thing that needs to be pointed out. Black Lives Matter's crap is all about communism. They want to eliminate capitalism and implement socialism. And the people that want it the worst is the leadership. And because the leadership under socialism will always be taken care of. They'll always be taken care of. Why is CNN pushing socialism? Because they want to be the state-run news media. Why does Amazon want socialism? And they don't. But why would Amazon or Google want socialism? They want to be the state-run technology provider. Amazon wants to be the state-run distribution center. Big companies want control. That's why big companies love socialist programs, socialist regulations, because they can choke off the little people. Black Lives Matter supports all this stuff. Heck, on their website, they use terms like collective and comrade. They are based on Soviet-style communism. So, here's what I think. Because I'm kind of mixed on this whole thing. I think the whole thing's absolutely hysterical, and I think we should keep it up. But the mayor of Seattle and the governor of Washington don't want to deal with this mess in Chads. They're leftists, and they like the Marxist philosophy. But once again, the Marxist philosophy is showing failure. It is. And it's always going to. The funny thing is, when it fails, the media will say that communism wasn't done right, or they didn't have the right ideas. You hear this from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialist. Every time someone points to her, well, North Korea, Soviet Union, Venezuela, the first thing she said, well, they didn't do it right. Everyone who's tried communism didn't do it right. We're going to do it right in the United States if we just replace the government. Sounds kind of weird. The failure is only determined by population and land mass. And the duration of the failure is what I mean. There's no difference between 6 blocks in Seattle and millions of square miles in Russia. The difference is millions of square miles in Russia already have technology, already have agriculture, already have a lot of things that Russia needs to keep going for a while. And that's why these communist countries usually last about 5 years and then they start falling apart. When you have 6 blocks of Seattle, well, that 5 years ends up turning into 5 days because they just don't have anything that they need. Many people don't know this about the Soviet Union, but it was led by criminals. Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Beria, Putin were all involved in organized crime and most of them served prison time. These jerk-offs in Seattle are no different. They're all just a bunch of thugs and criminals within a city and trying to force the city to appease them, appease their behavior. So, again, there's another commonality between these countries. You look at China, North Korea, it was all the same. These leaders were criminals at one point. The problem is the city, and this is something the mayor doesn't get, the governor doesn't get, or any leftist doesn't get. The city can't appease them because they are criminals and thugs. They're always going to push. If you make criminality legal, they're going to find the edge that makes criminality illegal. They're going to keep pushing to get, to want, to desire more. And I just think of one statement: give a mouse a cookie, it's going to ask for a glass of milk. By the way, that Give a Mouse a Cookie book, if you haven't read it, you haven't given it to your kids, give it to them. That book is the most conservative and accurate portrayal of mankind than you could ever imagine. Animal Farm, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Plato, Socrates, St. Thomas Aquinas cannot match the wisdom of give a mouse a cookie. I actually have it in part of my library. I know Trump wants to take control of the situation, and I understand why. He's concerned for the businesses. He's concerned for the innocent citizens who don't buy into the BS of the left. And I would say probably most of Seattle does not buy into this crap. Let's be honest. I think the left does not have the embrace of society like everyone thinks they do. Even in states like Washington, Oregon, California, Washington, D.C. I know it's not a state, but Massachusetts, New York. I don't think they have that kind of thing. And he's worried about them. He's worried about real Americans, which no one else seems to be really concerned about. Let's call it what it is. As far as Durkin's response that the president has no right under the Constitution to send troops to Chaz, she needs to get herself some good attorneys who know something about the Constitution, because the reality is he does. We fought a civil war that killed 700,000 people, Americans, because part of the country seceded from the United States. If President Trump wants to storm Chaz with a regiment of Green Berets, he can, because though Chaz is not considered part of the United States at this moment by those idiots within Chaz. Everyone else knows that, oh, that's just Seattle, which is probably why this hasn't been taken serious. Trump isn't going to storm it with a regiment of Green Berets, because he knows these are a bunch of uneducated children that have never accomplished anything in their lives, and they're throwing a temper tantrum. That's all it is. So let them. Excuse me. Let them sit there for as long as they want, and let them play communist. The leadership doesn't seem to want to deal with it and are justifying it. The media is justifying it. Antifa and Black Lives Matter are justifying it. Democrats are justifying it. So let it go. Let's see how it turns out. Let's see what communism has to offer. Let them go. And we should film every second of it. Let's see the success that only collectivism can create. Let's see utopia. But we won't, unless it's Fox News, that they won't allow into the utopia. Because they're trying to hide this. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, AP, Reuters. They're all hiding this stuff. Because they know that this is the future. Or they believe it's the future. You know what? I'll give them a step further. We should let them create their utopia from the ground up. Let's disconnect their electricity. Let's unhook their water. Let's disable their phone service. That way they can develop their own, more perfect technologies together as a collective. You can follow me on Twitter at RunninFool, RUNNINFEWL. You can download or listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podcast Addict, and YouTube. Visit my website where you can see the show notes and about the 75 different links that I have for this story. You've listened to Gene, comrades. And this is Dumbasses Talking Politics.